This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacy Yarborough. I'm the North Haven Town Clerk. At this time, I will convene our special town meeting. Pursuant to North Haven Town Charter, Chapter 9, Section 903, the Town of North Haven special town meeting will now come to order. Firstly, a friendly reminder to all, inappropriate comments and/or outbursts will not be tolerated. Please be kind, courteous, and professional throughout the course of our town meeting. Civility in your comments and actions during all meetings is appreciated. Before we proceed any further, we do need to elect a moderator for tonight's town meeting. It is the moderator's function to bring before the meeting all items of the warning and to assist in obtaining the objective of the meeting while ensuring the rights of individual voters who wish to be heard. The moderator's duties also include helping any member of the town meeting who seeks clarification or advice with regard to parliamentary procedure. Further, when it's time to vote on any issue tonight, including voting for our meeting moderator, please be aware to vote, one must be an elector. To be considered an elector of the town, one must have been a registered voter in the town at the time of the most recent election, or one who pays taxes to the town on an assessment of property of not less than $1,000 on the most recent grand list assessment date, as well as a citizen of the United States at 18 years of age or older. This regulation will be enforced for all votes taken tonight. If you are unsure of your voting status and/or eligibility, you can check with me as I have a list up here and I can confirm your eligibility. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so at this time I'm going to open the floor for nominations for meeting moderator. Is there a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Stephen Miller.
Is there a second? Any other nominations from the floor? Hearing none, I will now put this to a vote. All in favor of Stephen Miller as the special town meeting moderator, please signify by saying aye. All opposed by saying nay. I now declare Stephen Miller as the moderator of tonight's meeting. Come on up. You're the next contestant.
Hi, welcome. My name is Stephen Miller. I will be your moderator for the evening. And now the town clerk will read the call of tonight's special meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Please be advised, you can leave that there. The following legal notice called the warning of meeting was published pursuant to Connecticut state statute. Notice is hereby given of a special town meeting of the Town of North Haven to be held on Monday, May 20th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of the North Haven High School, 221 Elm Street, North Haven, Connecticut, at 7 p.m. to consider and act upon the following. 1, to consider and act upon a resolution adopting the proposed ordinance to provide a tax abatement for real property taxes for the surviving spouses of police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians who died while in the performance of duties. A copy of the proposed ordinance is on file and available for inspection in the office of the town clerk, and as I noted, there are some in the back if you need it. This notice was dated at North Haven, Connecticut on the 2nd day of May 2024 and signed by the Board of Selectmen.
So now the town clerk will read the only item of the special meeting agenda.
Thank you. To To consider and act upon a resolution adopting the proposed ordinance to provide a tax abatement for real property taxes for the surviving spouses of police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians who died while in the performance of duties. Pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 12-81X, the Town of North Haven, through its town meeting, hereby adopts this ordinance for the abatement of residential real estate taxes for spouses of firefighters, police officers, and emergency medical technicians, EMT, who die on duty while in the performance of their duties. A, definitions. The following words, terms, and phrases, when used in this ordinance, shall have the meaning ascribed to them in this section, except where the context clearly indicates a different meaning. Emergency medical technician, EMT, means any person who was a resident of the Town of North Haven at the time of his or her death, was certified as an emergency medical technician by the State of Connecticut Office of Emergency Medical Services, and was performing EMT duties full-time or part-time for any valid municipal ambulance service provider located within the geographical boundaries of the State of Connecticut. Firefighter means any person who was a resident of the Town of North Haven at the time of his or her death and was a duly employed or volunteer member of a municipal fire department for the purpose of performing fire duties full-time or part-time for any valid fire department located within the geographical boundaries of the State of Connecticut. Police officer means any person who was a resident of the Town of North Haven at the time of his or her death and was a duly sworn member of the municipal police department serving in official capacity, full-time or part-time, with compensation, or duly sworn member of the town police department or agency, serving the town in an official capacity, full-time or part-time, including but not limited to school resource officers, for any valid police department located within the geographical boundaries of the State of Connecticut. EMT duties means duties performed while traveling to, at, or returning directly from calls routed through an emergency dispatch center, or tests or trials of any apparatus or equipment normally used by the employer ambulance service provider, while instructing or being instructed in EMT duties, or while engaging in any other duty ordered to be performed by a superior or commanding officer in the ambulance service provider. Fire duties means duties performed while at fires, while answering alarms of fires, while answering calls for mutual aid assistance, while returning from calls for mutual aid assistance, while directly returning from fires, while at tests or trials of any apparatus or equipment normally used by the fire department, while going to or returning directly from such tests or trials, while instructing or being instructed in fire duties, and any other duty ordered to be performed by a superior or commanding officer in the fire department. Police duties means any action which an officer is obliged or authorized by law, rule, regulation, or written condition of employment of service to perform during regularly scheduled hours or other hours that qualify for compensation from a local police department. Performance of duty means the death occurs while the firefighter, police officer, or EMT is performing an action solely related to performance of their regular work or as part of it. It does not include deaths that could just have likely occurred while not in the performance of such duties. In the event that the Board of Selectmen finds that a determination is necessary to conclude that the death was in performance of duties, the First Selectman shall consult with the applicable chief and commission along with the town attorney, and the First Selectman may consult a licensed medical professional engaged by the town if it is deemed appropriate to reach a consensus conclusion. The First Selectman shall present the conclusion to the Board of Selectmen for final decision. Regular travel to and from the place of business is not considered in the performance of duties. A certified copy of an incident report or such other reasonable evidence required by the town shall be provided by an applicant. Surviving spouse means the person who was resident of the Town of North Haven and legally married to or in a legally recognized marriage with the police officer, EMT, or firefighter at the time of the police officer's, EMT's, or firefighter's death. B, in accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 12-81X, there is hereby established effective for the grand list of October 1st, 2022, an abatement of 100% of municipal real estate residential property taxes due with respect to real property owned by the surviving spouse of a firefighter, EMT, or police officer who has died as a result of the performance of his or her duties as police officer, EMT, or firefighter. The abatement only applies to town residential real estate taxes due to the town of North Haven and does not apply to any district or other political subdivision taxes that may be due. C, the tax abatement will remain in effect so long as the surviving spouse owns the property as of the October 1st grand list and occupies the property as his primary residence, or until the spouse conveys her fee interest in the subject resident. If the spouse subsequently purchases another residence in North Haven and all qualifying criteria remain, then the tax abatement shall apply to the new residence. For any property that is in trust, a copy of the trust agreement must be provided to the assessor for review. The terms of the trust agreement must indicate that the claimant must be considered to be the primary beneficiary of the trust in order to be eligible for the abatement hereunder. D, upon the death of any surviving spouse entitled to tax relief pursuant to this section, the tax relief hereunder shall immediately expire and terminate. E, if any person who is entitled to a tax abatement hereunder conveys his or her fee title in the property with respect to which the tax abatement hereunder has been granted, the tax relief shall be suspended as of the date of conveyance, and the non-qualifying grantee of such property shall pay the town the prorated share of taxes thereby due and owing. The assessor shall be notified by the applicant of the transfer within 10 days of the property transfer date. F, the property tax relief provided in this section shall, in any case where title to real property is recorded in the name of the qualifying surviving spouse and any other person or persons, be prorated to reflect a fractional portion of such qualifying spouse, or if such property is a multiple family or multiple use dwelling, such relief shall be prorated to reflect the fractional portion of such property occupied by the qualifying spouse. A spouse desiring such abatement shall submit an application to the assessor requesting a determination as to whether such abatement is permitted. G, if such surviving spouse remarries, the abatement shall immediately expire and terminate. H, the assessor shall prescribe such forms and procedures as may be necessary to implement this section. The assessor, in addition, shall take such steps necessary to satisfactorily establish and verify the facts as to the qualifying survivor spouse's interest in the property by requesting such documents as the assessor deems necessary. Such documentation shall be required and provided annually to maintain the tax abatement. Eligibility shall be determined by the assessor and/or his/her designee, and such determination shall be final. I, no later than November 1st of each year, the surviving spouse shall complete and file with the assessor an application for the 100% abatement and attest annually that they have not remarried since the death of their police officer, EMT, or firefighter spouse. And J, this ordinance shall become effective on the 15th day after publication of the notice of passage of the ordinance and shall be applicable to assessment years commencing on or after October 1st, 2022. The resolution with regard to this. Be it resolved that the town of North Haven, by way of state statute and its own pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 12-81X, the town of North Haven, through its town meeting, hereby adopts this ordinance for the abatement of residential real estate taxes for spouses of firefighters, police officers, and emergency medical technicians, EMT, who die on duty while in performance of their duties.
Is there a second to the resolution? So moved. Okay, now, we have heard the pending resolution. Now we come to the point of the meeting where we open the floor for discussion for pending resolution or agenda item number 1. There are some rules. One of them, for any ensuing discussion, anyone who wishes to speak will get a chance to comment before anyone can be called a second time. 2, you must come forward to the microphone, state your name and address before you begin to speak. Number 3, discussion will be limited to the item only at this time. Sure. Is this one on? I'm sorry. Could you hear me now? All right. And number 4, we ask that you limit your questions and discussion to no longer than 5 minutes per turn. And number 5, remember that everyone has a chance to speak at least once. You may have another turn. Would anyone care to offer any discussion at this time?
Steve.
Thank you very much for attending this evening, ladies and gentlemen. The ordinance that you have before you is a byproduct of many months of trying to put an ordinance together to have families qualify. This ordinance was modeled after several other ordinances that exist in certain municipalities across the state. The Board of Selectmen, Bill Piper, Sally Boemi, did a lot of research in coming up with a draft in the beginning. We entertained a lot of comments from the public. We've had public meetings on this at the Board of Selectmen meeting. There were a lot of additions that were made based on public feedback. There were some deletions that were made based on public feedback. As this advanced down through the months, we ended up with, I believe, 8 drafts. This is the 8th draft. That's how long it took to get to this point. The goal tonight is to open this up to public discussion, to have you tell us how you feel about this ordinance. Our town attorney, Jeff D'Onofrio, is here this evening, and he has also put a great deal of time into this draft, this final ordinance that you see. And he was the architect of draft after draft after draft, making the changes based on the feedback from the public. So tonight, if there's anyone here who's at this meeting, a town meeting for the first time, this town meeting is the legislative body of the town, where a vote will take place. You will be voting tonight on this ordinance. But we're going to sit back here as the Board of Selectmen. We're going to ask you to come up if you have any comments or have any opinions, and our town attorney will be answering the questions for you. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody who would like to speak? Come up to the microphone, please.
Mary White Summerlin. I support this tax abatement ordinance, and I encourage people to vote in favor of adopting it. This is the least we could do for the surviving spouses of police, firefighters, or EMTs who died in the line of duty, who died in performance of their duties. While I don't think consulting with a licensed medical professional to determine if the death was in performance of duties, and no other town's tax abatement ordinance includes that language. And while I understand there is language which is compromise language, and that is included, and that is shall to may, I still don't think it's necessary. However, if the first selectman determines the town would like to consult with a licensed medical professional to determine if the death was a line of duty death, in performance of duties, I have a suggestion. Seek to consult this licensed medical professional who used to be a firefighter, or used to be a police officer, or used to be an EMT, depending on the occupation of the person who died in the performance of their duties, or in the line of duties. And then I just have 2 questions. One, does this ordinance expire, requiring us to meet again to renew it? And the second question is, should state statutes, laws, or whatever, be passed that would impact our tax abatement ordinance and cause us to need to make changes, would notification of those changes be explained at a Board of Selectmen meeting? And I'd like to close with encouraging people to vote in favor of adopting this tax abatement ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Is there, Jeff, do you want to?
Sure,
answer the
yeah.
questions?
The first question that Mrs. White asked had to do with expiration of the ordinance. There's no sunset provision in the ordinance. As the legislative body of the town, any adoption of an ordinance, any repeal of an ordinance, any modification of an ordinance comes to the town meeting, but there is no expiration date. With respect to state law potentially superseding the ordinance, it really depends upon the way the law is written. You'll see some state statutes that begin with a provision along the lines of notwithstanding any ordinance or charter provision to the contrary, in which case the intent of the General Assembly is to preempt municipal law, which really is questionable from a legislative perspective because Connecticut is a home rule state. And what that means is that our charter and our ordinances represent the organic law of the municipal entity that is the town. But it really would, the answer to your question is, it would really depend upon the way that the legislation is written. If there was a bill that, for example, right now, the statute that was created by the legislature in 2000 to allow municipalities at their sole discretion to adopt an ordinance to provide this tax abatement that we're here talking about tonight for surviving spouses of EMTs, firefighters, and police officers. That statute is 12-81X. And 12-81 sets forth, as you can tell from the X, a laundry list of exemptions, some of which are mandatory, some of which are discretionary. So the legislature would have to make some change to 12-81X, which is not very likely because 12-81 is the entire statutory scheme for exemptions. The only real change that they would be able to make would be to cause it to no longer be discretionary and to be mandatory. And if there was a statute that was, it does happen from time to time that there are statutes that are adopted that conflict with municipal ordinances. In that situation, we would advise the town of the need to call a special town meeting to either modify the ordinance or to rescind it altogether based on a conflict with state law. Okay?
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Jenny Caldwell, 69 Kimberly Circle. I've been following the ordinance and the many rewrites of this ordinance since December. And I want to start by saying I'm in complete agreement with an ordinance that would provide a tax abatement for the surviving spouses of police officers, firefighters, and EMTs who die in the line of duty. But I don't support this ordinance as it's written currently. The language is designed to limit who receives the benefit. And I have been again, I said I already followed the discussion. The original ordinance was crafted without input from either police or fire departments or input from the respective commissions. The Fire Commission requested changes to the language that would exclude a spouse from receiving the abatement if the firefighter or police officer's death did not meet the criteria, even when the death had already gone through a process to determine if it occurred in the line of duty. At the last Board of Selectmen meeting, the Attorney D'Onofrio had stated that the ordinance needed to be in place before July 1st, where the decision would be out of the hands of the Board of Selectmen due to pending legislation, which puts the responsibility on determination solely in the hands of the fire and police chief. The state law is now in effect, and it is signed by the governor, was signed by the governor on 5/14. I'm not really 100% clear whether that's true or not, but that was one of the things that was discussed. I strongly believe that the decision should go through the process, and if the police and the fire chief has designated a death to be a line of duty death, I think the spouse should receive a tax abatement. The other discussion that occurred at the last Board of Selectmen meeting was regarding balancing the needs or giving the benefit to a spouse over the other taxpayers who would have to pay more in their taxes and to allow a tax abatement. As a taxpayer, I fully support providing the tax abatement. I'm not concerned that my taxes will go up a little to provide that abatement to a spouse of somebody who dies in the line of duty. In terms of being worried about tax relief, it would be a bigger concern to me as we look at other types of tax abatements that occur. But I 100% believe that that spouses, if it's been determined by the police and fire chief that the death has occurred in the line of duty, that a spouse should get the tax abatement. So I will support this ordinance as it's written, because I do believe that it will exclude spouses from getting a tax abatement even when their spouse has died in the line of duty.
Thank you. Is there anything you need to add?
I think the only question I heard there was maybe about at the Board of Selectmen meeting when I discussed the option under then pending House Bill 5279 for municipalities before July 1 to adopt a different process by which the line of duty death determination could be made. It's right in the bill, both with respect to the death of a uniformed, paid, or volunteer firefighter or police officer. The bill specifically says that the chief of such firefighter or police department shall have the authority to determine whether such firefighter or police officer died in the line of duty unless a local charter or ordinance in effect on July 1, 2024 provides the authority to a different individual or entity to make such determination. So that's in the bill. The other thing I would say about this bill is not in any way an amendment to 1281X. This bill is specifically an amendment to a different statute, 7313E. And if you read the entire bill, you'll see that the way it's written limits the determination, this default determination that the chiefs are entitled to make unless the municipality, through ordinance or charter, adopts a different process by July 1, to deaths that are caused by a cardiac event, stroke, or pulmonary embolism that occurred not later than 24 hours after they concluded a shift. So you can make the argument that that's more narrow than the ordinance as drafted, because the ordinance as drafted isn't saying that it has to be one of these causes of death in order to be determined a line of duty death, and it also doesn't have a 24-hour cutoff. So aside from the fact that this is a different statute from 1281X, really the relevance of this bill has to do with the legislature saying that if you don't have a charter or ordinance in effect as of July 1, then the chief or the fire chief or police chief are the sole decision makers.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Good evening, Jim Buck, 31 Anselmi Drive. So when I first saw a lot of discussion going on regarding this ordinance, I was delighted. I was glad that the Board of Selectmen were taking this up. And then hearing that the state legislature was moving on, I said this is good news. I don't think there's anybody in this room that feels that those that put their lives at risk to help others would not be deserving of appropriate benefits. And I believe that this is exactly the intent of what we have before us. But sometimes there's a highlight on some details or differences that are important. And in this case, I look at what we have put together here, and I believe that those details are very important. So we obviously have an elected Board of Selectmen, and they're going to obviously use good fiduciary decision-making when looking at these situations. But they are also appointing public safety chiefs, a fire chief, a police chief, who know the job, know the dangers, and understand what goes into that. So I don't know if anybody's been aware of line of duty death investigations, but unfortunately in my career I have. And it's a very lengthy and heart-wrenching process. But in addition to that, what you have are the knowledge of the individuals that are in these decision-making positions of the job, specifically of the job. And the state bill captures that. And unfortunately, this ordinance partially captures that. Again, it's going to be the board that appoints these service chiefs, and those service chiefs will have a role in the decision-making process, but they are not the deciding factor. And I think that's really important when you think about the fact that, and police and fire chiefs don't like this when I say this, but every single one of those chiefs, they were at the bottom one day doing those jobs, and they understand them. And I think that's an important distinction to make here. Unfortunately, North Haven has seen this issue go from hypothetical to very real, and it's impacted some people in this room. And I think it's important that we stand up for the best arbiter of these decisions, and I believe that is the chiefs that the board has appointed to those positions. I do have one point, and maybe Attorney D'Onofrio can clarify. So when you were highlighting some of the differences, it sounded like those were the medical clauses that you were referencing. You were talking about the cardiac, the other clauses. So for instance, a police officer who's slain while performing his duty, or a firefighter who succumbs to a structure fire, that is, let's say there's a collapse, or there's some type of event there. Those non-medical events in the state bill, if you could address that, please, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
The bill that's being talked about right now is House Bill 5279, which passed in the legislature a couple of weeks ago. And what that statute does is modify, like I said before, the statute that creates the tax exemption opportunity for towns is 1281X. This is not that statute. This is a different statute, and it's an act concerning authority to declare that a firefighter or police officer died in the line of duty. So it's really not intending to affect the workers' compensation law or the tax exemption law. And the specific modification that is codified by this bill, I mean, I can read it. It's one paragraph. If the death of a uniformed, paid, or volunteer firefighter is caused by a cardiac event, stroke, or pulmonary embolism that occurred not later than 24 hours after such firefighter concluded a shift or training during which such firefighter was involved in non-routine or strenuous physical activity, the chief of such firefighter's fire department shall have the authority to determine whether such firefighter died in the line of duty unless a local charter or ordinance in effect on July 1, 2024 provides the authority to a different individual or entity to make such determination. Such declaration by a chief shall not be used as evidence for a workers' compensation claim under Chapter 568. So, doesn't impact workers' comp decision, and the way it's written here, the fire chief and the police chief would be part of the decision-making process as to whether it's a line of duty death. They simply would not be the sole decision makers.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Good evening, Tom Haggerty, Windsor Road East, and President for the North Haven Professional Firefighters Association. Reading the bill, I think the ambiguity of the language I had some real concerns with, and to be honest, my initial thought, with all respect, was that this was written to protect the town versus to give somebody a benefit. A couple of issues have been brought up here tonight, specifically in terms of who gets to declare a line of duty death. And Mr. Pumphrey can probably answer this. Is this an ordinance that is saying who gets to declare a line of duty death, or is this an ordinance that says who gets to decide who gets a tax abatement?
Do you want to answer the questions at the end of his time?
Yeah. That would be my first question, because if this is an ordinance to give a tax abatement, then I don't see how that applies to the state law about who applies a line of duty death. They don't seem to intermingle. They seem to be two different topics to me. The other one would be some hypothetical situations. And if you're familiar with the PTSD bills and the cancer, the presumptive cancer language at all, I'm not sure. But all of those things are now considered presumptive line of duty deaths. So when a firefighter has a cancer, a public servant dies of a PTSD diagnosed illness, all those things are now workers' comp or some other form of government subsidy. Those spouses are covered for that. So in your opinion, would this ordinance, as it's currently written, cover those families for firefighters and officers that die from cancer or PTSD related illnesses be covered by their families receive this benefit?
Thank you.
This ordinance, as stated in the first paragraph, is enacted under Connecticut General Statute 12-81X. It's a tax abatement ordinance. That's all it is. It doesn't impact workers' compensation determinations. It doesn't impact anything else. The Board of Selectmen, under the proposed ordinance, if they deem it to be appropriate, is being authorized to make a determination about eligibility for a tax abatement. This is on its face and in practice limited to tax abatement decisions under 12-81X, which is a one-sentence statute.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Seeing none other, I think it.
Somebody raising his hand in the back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gentleman. He still has time.
Yes, please.
I'm Haggerty again, Windsor Road East. Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify, because I think people are confusing the state law impacting this ordinance and this ordinance impacting the state bill. They're two separate things, and neither they don't meet in between. Obviously, they're all connected, but they don't impact each other. And can you just give me your thoughts on whether or not people in those circumstances regarding the cancer legislation or the PTSD, whether this would apply to those families? Thank you.
The only authority that the town has to adopt an ordinance based on the tax exemption is specifically set forth in 12-81X. 12-81X says the legislative body of any municipality may establish by ordinance a program to abate all or a portion of the property taxes due with respect to real property owned and occupied as the principal residence of the surviving spouse of a police officer, firefighter, or emergency medical technician who dies while in the performance of such officers, firefighters, or technicians' duties. So that's all it covers, because that's the only authority. There's no tax exemption under 12-81 to cover any of the other circumstances that you described. Okay?
Is there any other discussion?
Nancy Barrett, Crispy Drive. I'd like to say that I strongly support this ordinance, which provides 100% tax abatement for real property taxes for the surviving spouses of police officers, firefighters, and EMTs who live in North Haven and who tragically died while in the performance of duties. This ordinance is entirely optional. It is not mandatory. And it is my sincere hope that in the future there are no more sudden deaths among our police safety professionals or volunteers. I hope that we do not have to award this particular benefit in the future, but I am glad that this ordinance is in place. I'd like to take this opportunity to commend Mr. Frieda for getting the ball rolling last fall when he asked Attorney D'Onofrio to create the first draft of this ordinance. I'd also like to thank Selectman Piper for his thoughtful suggestions and offer my gratitude and appreciation to Selectman Buemi for her extensive research, detailed edits, and free legal input. I also appreciate the public commentary statements made from members of our North Haven community. And while I certainly had my concerns very early on about the content of the early drafts and the premature speculation about which cases and hypotheticals would or would not qualify, I now believe that the language of this ordinance offers a very clear set of guidelines for those cases in which the performance of duty death is not obvious. Now, I have heard from many North Haven citizens about this, and some have questioned whether this ordinance is fair because other town employees die and their surviving spouses would not get this tax abatement benefit. I've also heard that for each case in which the tax benefit would be awarded, that tax revenue lost would have to be made up in other ways. So to these comments, I say the following. Yes, there are in fact town employees in sanitation, public works, streets and roads that work very hard and enhance our daily lives. However, they do not risk their lives in order to protect others. Policemen, firefighters, and EMTs routinely put themselves in harm's way and take significant risks in order to serve and protect the public, both individually and collectively. And I believe that this ordinance provides a mechanism to show our gratitude each and every year to the spouses of those in public safety who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any commentary? Is there anybody else that would like to speak? So, in light of nobody else, thank you for those who stepped up to the microphone. It's time to vote on the... Oh, I didn't, sorry.
I just wanted, I have a question for Attorney D'Onofrio and then a very brief comment. Jeff, during the many drafts of this, so much of our focus was on other provisions. And as I heard the town clerk read subsection E on the bottom of page 2 about if there's a conveyance, the non-qualifying grantee shall pay the town the prorated share of taxes. I'm wondering, that would have an impact on real estate closings, perhaps. Could something be recorded in the land records to give notice on that? Do you see that necessary with that language?
No.
The ordinance itself is notice.
Well, the ordinance itself is notice, and the reality is that is the concern with the prorating? Is that?
Well, no, I'm not. It just says that, if there's a conveyance, which would include a sale,
Yep.
and it's sold to a non-qualifying grantee, that grantee shall pay to the town the prorated share of taxes thereby due and owing.
Right.
So kind of like the normal,
The custom.
the customary
Yep.
adjustment that we do for all closings.
Yep.
But so you don't see any need to put
No,
any
because
potential buyers on notice?
The
because
seller, right, the seller is not going to worry about it, but the buyer will have to, and that's the buyer's duty through
Right.
counsel to
I just,
look at the closing statement and make
Right.
sure it's.
you can understand my question, I hope. Okay, and since it is effective for the list of October 1st of 2022, now, of course, the first payment was made in July of '23. The second installment on that list was just paid this past January. The ordinance allows us to abate taxes. I am very hopeful that we could refund, because we're going back to '22. I'm assuming those have been paid. So can we, under the statute, refund going back in time?
If not refund, but if someone who is otherwise eligible was eligible on that date, makes an application and the application is granted, then the abatement would be issued in the form of a credit.
A credit, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I was hopeful of that, because they deserve that. Okay, and I just want to make a quick comment. First, I really want to thank my colleagues on the Board of Selectmen, Bill Piper and Mike Frieda. I think this was one of our finest hours. It was much more difficult than we first anticipated, our first meeting when we discussed the first draft of the ordinance. I don't think any of us expected it to go on as long as it did, and I think that we worked well together, and I want to thank both of you personally for working in a very bipartisan way to try to help surviving spouses of first responders who tragically die in the performance of their duties. I believe that we, as a board, in presenting this ordinance, as we unanimously recommended it, we did everything we could to make this tax abatement benefit available to as many people as possible. And again, we made it 100%. Many municipalities only give 50%. Many only make it applicable to those who work in their town and live in town. We have made it applicable to all firefighters, police officers, and EMTs working for municipalities within the state. And I think that, again, as Jeff explained, we were confined very strongly by the wording of the statute. And I think we did everything we could to work within those restrictions to make it applicable to as many people as possible. And again, I want to thank the both of you for working so collaboratively on what I think is a positive end result. Thank you.
I would second what Sally has said regarding us trying to work together to come up with something that would actually be real and meaningful, to recognize the service of any of our, firefighters, firefighters, policemen, or municipal, if we did have a municipal EMT in town, or in any other town who lived here, where they had, made the sacrifice that the ordinance is trying to describe. From listening to all the commentary, as Sally has said, it's very frustrating because we're constrained by the ordinance, which is really not very encompassing. Let me put it that way. I could think of other ways that the ordinance, the statute could be at the state level could have given us more latitude, and I think that's what we're trying to deal with, unfortunately, is to comply with what's been authorized or allowed by Section 1281X, as Jeff has mentioned. One of the things I've mentioned too. I mean, it doesn't include public works. It doesn't include being a veteran. It does not include members of the Connecticut National Guard or Army Reserve if they die while on an active duty for training on a drill weekend, or while they're on active duty and maybe even serving overseas, or at a training site here in the United States. We've had a number of people in the military die in training accidents recently, as well as losing 3 soldiers in Syria not too long ago. So, we don't have any latitude to do any of that. So, but I appreciate your comments, and Jeff, yours as well, to try to hopefully do something that conforms with the statute, in terms of our town ordinance.
Steve, get up. So as we come to a close tonight, and before the actual vote, we're at the end, the 8th draft, and it's in your hands to tell us what you would like to see. But I want to share with you the beginning of this process. And it was in October of 2022 when the Bristol Police Department reached out to me. As all of us at that time were going through such a wide range of emotions with the tragic death of Officer Dustin DeMonte, the Bristol Police Department reached out for me and asked me if I would consider having an ordinance put together. Now, at that time, I did not realize there was a state statute that's been referenced here tonight. And I did not realize that the statute referenced the word may establish an ordinance. And it was at that point there, after speaking with the Bristol Police Department, speaking with the DeMonte family, that we were on a mission to create this ordinance. After that, I'd be in the fire department gym, working out with Anthony DeSimone. It was always about his family, his children. It was never about, what was going on in the town government. Occasionally, Anthony would ask me about the economic development that was happening in town. That was of great interest to him. Matt Wirtz would see him in the fire department, sometimes in the gym also, very quiet man. Little did we realize that after the Bristol Police Department had reached out for me on the creation of an ordinance, that North Haven would suffer 2 more tragedies. It's been a very emotional time, particularly for the families, for the fire department, for the Bristol Police Department, for our own police department, and for many of the citizens of North Haven. So here we are at the end. I wanted to share with you what the beginning was. I hope you had a chance to read it followed along tonight. And very shortly, we're going to be calling for the town vote. Thank you very much.
Anybody else would like to speak? It is time to call for the vote. May I say all in favor of the pending resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposing, say nay. All right, so how do we do? Poll them?
We have to do it by roll call. Yeah, we can do a hand vote. So do it again and do a hand vote, and I'll count.
So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Raise your hand.
This time.
Okay, that's 15.
Don't forget them.
Those three as
Well,
well. 18. What did I say?
15, I think.
Hold on, I gotta do it again, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17, yay, and then we need the nay.
by show of hands, anybody nay? The resolution passes. As there's no further business to consider tonight, I hereby declare the special town meeting adjourned. The minutes of this meeting will be made available to the public by the town clerk as soon as possible. Thank you, and have a good night.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.